Hi, and welcome to episode 5 of Eternally Destined. 2011, January. There was a missionary project by Maranatha that was going out to Zimbabwe. They had asked Maranatha to help them build schools in Zimbabwe. It was Victoria Falls, and they accepted, they agreed, and all of the schools are, all the materials for the schools are manufactured here in the States and shipped together in these steel containers. So all of these steel containers for this huge project in Victoria Falls get shipped out there into Africa, in Zimbabwe, and the first thing that you got to do when you have this huge construction project with materials that have been transferred to the site is you take an inventory. And so they opened up all the steel containers, they pulled out everything that they had, they laid it out into piles and figured out exactly what they had. And they noticed there weren't any nuts for these 500 bolts that they had. They needed 2 nuts for each bolt, so they were missing 1,000 nuts. Now, you couldn't just go to Home Depot and problem in Zimbabwe is that the nuts there that you could buy, they're metric, and in America they're standard. So the 2 different sizes, and what are you going to do? You could maybe get some from South Africa, possibly you'd have to, return to the States and get these nuts. But they had a different idea. They knelt down and they prayed. They knew God had a plan. They knew that God had orchestrated the building of the schools, and they asked God to take care of it. When they prayed, they got up and they sent one of the local men to the local store. It was kind of like a mom and pop hardware store. And the guy goes up to him and he says, "Can I speak with the oldest gentleman here?" And the guy comes out, he shuffles out, and he says, "Well, what can I do for you?" And the local man hands him a bolt and says, "I need 1,000 nuts for this bolt." And the old man grabs the bolt and he looks at it and he turns it over and he says, Americans are stupid. They should have gone with metric just like the rest of the world. But this is a standard bolt, and it needs a standard nut. And this is was a British colony. We have metric here. There are no standard bolts. You probably won't be able to find it. You'll have to order it from the United States. And the local man says, "Do me a favor. Why don't you just go in the back, check on your shelves?" And after he received that whole lecture about standard and metric bolts, the old man, he obliged. He shuffled back into the back room and he was gone for 20 minutes. And 20 minutes later, he comes out, and he's got that bolt with a nut spinning on it. And he says, "I've got a story for you." He says, 60 years ago, there was a crazy Rhodesian farmer that came to this store, and he ordered 1,000 bolts. And the 1,000 bolts that he ordered, I didn't want to place, but I did, so I ordered them from the United States. But the United States would not send me 1,000 bolts without sending me 1,000 nuts to go with it. So I had to order both the nuts and the bolts, even though the farmer just wanted the bolts, for whatever reason. So I ordered them, I sold the 1,000 bolts to the farmer, the Rhodesian farmer, and those 1,000 nuts have been sitting on my shelf for the last 60 years. The story, it inspires me because I know that I can trust God. The scripture says, "As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." God's always ahead of us. God's got a plan. And this is why we can trust Him. We can completely trust God and what He will do for us and His plans for us, because 60 years before those bolts and nuts were forgotten, God remembered. My name is Daniel Rowe, and I just want to encourage you along your journey because you are eternally destined.